Howdy folks, my name's Christian and welcome to Bullish on Farming. Today I'm moving our stalker group, which is really our heifers and cull cows, a small subgroup of 8 heifers and 2 cow-calf pairs. These mums got their calves still on them until they're ready to wean. And the plan is in the fall to cull these cows. Had a great career. Some of them are just old now, and well, Fawn there, you can see how big her bag is. Good healthy cow, but her calves have a hard time latching to that bag, and I don't know, year after year, if that keeps happening and she's had a good career at a fair age, you don't want to be dealing with the stresses of getting a calf to latch, especially if it's over the course of a few days while dealing with other things in calving season. But you tolerate what you can and you make notes, and soon it comes time to call out what's sourcing your problems. So this is a 70-day rest now, moving these girls, and you can see how lush it is. I had the quad in here. It's kind of made some tracks. We got a good amount in here. Let's see, if I put my arm down, we're up to my elbow, some up to my shoulder. And it's September 14th. And I don't know about you, if you're paying attention to cattle, but you see most of the fields out there, and they do not have that much ground cover or vegetation above the soil. And that's okay. But that is what conventional grazing gets you. Especially if you get a drier summer. But this is what mob grazing gets you if you have proper rest periods. Even if you go through dry spells, you're better off because you're grazing your farm more efficiently. And so your land's getting more rest, and the animals aren't grazing your plants right down to the soil. They're eating the top half of the plant where most of the protein and energy is anyways, because the top of the plant is closer to the sun. And so this setup with our stalker group, I got a lane, and where we just walked through the gate back there, if they walk up to the barn, there are water troughs up there. And that's just the way we handle this field. I create a lane back to the water trough. And as we get down further, there's actual paddock section that's sliced out of the field. So they don't have access to that past the wire. But as we get down some more, they have a 45-yard wide paddock. And this field's probably about 150 yards long. And that's a multi-day paddock for these girls. And since they have plenty to graze in this laneway, that'll probably add another day or 2. So that paddock back there is probably a 2 to 3 day paddock, possibly a 4-day. But I got to evaluate it then to see how much feed we have left up top, because we still don't want to be grazing it down to the soil, although this is probably the last lap for this group on this field. The next field they go to, we jump the water trough with them. And because we have our water lines in that field. This field we kept this way because we don't mind having this laneway for this particular field. And as you can see, it's not hurting, folks. It actually grows quite lush because it gets rest periods. So although it gets a lot of foot traffic, it gets to rest. And we did some bale grazing. And you can see right here, big clover patch from the bale that we grazed there. Another clover patch right here. Yeah, some weeds spawning in there, but it's only year 1. And, you know, I'm not as worried about weeds, at least, as I am the fertility of our soil. Like I said, it's September 14th, and we got plenty of high quality feed in our pasture for our cattle. I'd rather that than not have any feed and not have any weeds, if you know what I mean. So working with where you're coming from And you can see how these girls are just going to town. The previous section I had, we don't manage as much that they were in. And so it would be closer to a conventional grazing system. It's a 20-acre wilderness, we call it. And we have our main group constantly rotating on pasture. But because we have a subgroup, we have to include those wilderness or those wilds. And we can't really mob graze in there. Not yet. I got to build some fences. And next year we'll be able to do some of that in there. So these girls get 20 acres of free range. And then we have another 12 acres between this field and the next one up there that we mob graze. Of course, still free range cattle, but we manage the pastures and the feed intake in a much more efficient manner. And so this group has put on some good weight. You know, you can see this heifer here, she's looking good. Got a nice barrel on her. This little girl right here, she was a twin. She's got a barrel on her. But you should see the steers in our main group. Again, this just goes back to the fact that this group gets the wilderness. So about half the time they're just grazing plants right down free range without a mob grazing system. But you can see these girls are still looking plump. Okay, they're not hurting on feed. That's the other twin. So they're a bit smaller frame. Let's see this girl behind her. That's a decent size heifer. Okay, so these would be last year's calves. So they're anywhere from 12 to 15 months right now. And well, like I was saying before, you should see the steers we have in our other group, because our mums are looking good, no doubt, but they have a calf sucking on them. So, you know, the calf's taking a lot out of them, and those calves, whoo, you should see the barrels on those calves. Got some beefy calves. But the steers in there that we're running with the group, they are looking like they were putting on better weight than these girls for sure. Again, that just goes to back to the fact that they are mob grazing 100% of the time, while these girls are mob grazing about 50 to 60% of the time. In the later half of the season, at least, in the earlier season with the spring flush, I'd say they're mob grazing about 60 to 65% of the time. And anyways, these girls are much better off than if they were just conventionally grazing. Already seen the improvements in our cattle because I came in last fall to manage livestock on this farm, and we've been sending out beef monthly. And I can just see how these ones are sizing up. They're getting a better protein intake and feed intake from our grazing program this year. But anyways, that's not to brag, that's just to recognize the improvements we're making, and there's still a lot of room for improvement, okay? This side of the field here, if you remember what I showed you earlier in this video, it's not as lush, okay? This is still 70 days. You know, there's a lot that's just 6 inches in here. And you know, the alfalfa sprouts higher, and maybe the clover and some of the grasses, but I mean, there's a lot of erosion on this side of this field as it starts to dive down. And so you get the foot erosion from the cattle, you get the wind erosion, you get the water erosion from running water downhill. And all that year after year, if you're conventionally grazing or overgrazing your fields, it's not going to have much ground cover to keep that topsoil in place, and so it just runs right off. And I mean, I'm not complaining because still tons of feed in here. Like I say, there's still about 2 days of feed there for the amount of cattle we have in here. And so next year it's going to be even more fertile, and the next year even more fertile. And you know, I was looking at this field earlier this year, and in early August it was taken by thistle, and it's still in here, right? You see a nice thistle patch there, but it's dried out, and still got tons of grass. And like I said, we're focused on fertility, okay? We're not going to worry about weeds. Sure, we're going to be clipping weeds in weed infested fields after first pass in June. You know, if we can afford to do another clipping, taking a look at the weather, if the moisture is going to cooperate, we can do that. But we don't want to be clipping fields in front of the cattle. We want to be clipping the fields once the cattle pass, so that that field has the most amount of time to regenerate and regrow. Because what's most important is that our grasses are growing and that they are ready for our animals. We don't want to be bringing our animals before our grasses are ready and just keep hammering down those plants and degrading the root systems. Okay? We want to be stimulating growth and regeneration by grazing the plants at the right time. And that requires proper rest periods in your rotation. If you're not getting at least 60 days, you don't have enough, in my opinion, okay? You can get away with it, but to really be doing regenerative work in your soil and pastures, if you don't have at least 60 days rest, you're going to be hitting some pasture fatigue at some point, okay? Or you're just gonna be maintaining and not increasing fertility at a noticeable rate that's making a difference for your farm, okay? 75 days, 70 days, that's beautiful. That's what you want. And even if you have hurting fields, if you have at least 70, 75 days, you're on your way to doing some good work and regenerating your soil. Yeah, you can see these girls like what they have out here, and we're happy to give it to them. Fertility, fertility, fertility. You focus on your fertility and your land will feed your animals. And if you rely on your land to feed your animals and not the feed store, and you're increasing fertility, you're only producing more feed for your animals over time at a very low margin cost. Especially if you're letting the animals do the work and you're not using synthetic materials and chemicals to try and artificially boost your pastures. Okay? Using nature's processes to work with the land aligns with the symmetry of fertility and how it was designed in a natural way. And there's nothing as potent as that or as sustainable as that. So although your chemicals might be giving you good results for 1 year, you're degrading year after year with regards to soil health. And that's not to say that that's wrong, but I'm just saying it in a matter-of-fact manner, because these videos are for farmers or people interested in farming who, you know, have a calling of getting back to the land, who are already doing that or who would like to be doing that in any type of way. Sure, I run cattle, pigs, chickens, and that's how I exercise it, so that's what I can share here. And I mean, you gotta admit that cattle are just so photogenic. Like I said before, these aren't scripted videos. I just pop out the camera and it's off the cuff. So having said that, I just want to say thanks for stopping by, folks. See you on the next one.